Okay, also, if you're on this webinar and you don't normally receive notifications for this webinar series, you can put your email address in the chat box, and I will make sure that you receive any further communication for this series as we move forward. So yeah, I'm just going to give a little intro into the webinar today, and then I'm going to hand it over to Shannon, and she will take care of us the rest of the time. Having a strong sustainability capacity allows for the ability to maintain programming and its benefits over time. With this webinar, discussion topics will include the different elements that can strengthen a program's sustainability and how PSE changes can play a role in sustaining your program, and strengthen the structures and processes that exist within your program to ensure you can leverage resources to weather the changes and challenges that come your way. And here is Shannon Udy, our PSE health educator here at the Great Plains Good Health and Wellness Program.
Okay, so hello everyone, my name is Shannon. I am the PSE health educator for the Great Plains Good Health and Wellness Program. And our webinar today is titled PSE Changes for Sustainability. So just a little overview. During the first part of the presentation, we'll be discussing sustainability and the different components that go into overall sustaining your program in the long run, and the different components to think about that aren't always just PSE changes, but kind of the whole picture. And then we'll transition into the second part of the presentation, which we'll discuss more what PSE changes are, kind of what we mean when we say PSE changes, and the different definitions that can define a policy change, a system change, and an environmental change. And then at the end, we'll look at some examples of some local tribal PSE changes and how those tribes were able to implement those changes as a whole. So to start out, I just wanted to simply define sustainability, and I'm using the CDC's definition that they used in their Sustainability Planning Guide for Healthy Communities, which is a community's ongoing capacity and resolve to work together to establish, advance, and maintain effective strategies that continuously improve health and quality of life for all. So as I'm sure we're all aware, programs at all different levels in all settings and capacities struggle with their sustainability capacity. And unfortunately, when programs are forced to shut down or discontinue their services, their hard-won improvements in public health can dissolve. So to maintain these benefits, stakeholders should understand all of the factors that contribute to program sustainability. And with knowledge of those factors, then the stakeholders can then build their program capacity for sustainability and position their efforts for long-term success. So this little diagram just shows the different main components of sustainability, which is building strong partnerships and coalitions, which can really be the backbone of sustainability for a lot of programs. Employing a blend of strategies, such as PSE strategies, and then securing diverse resources and finding that balance of financial support with non-financial. So a few of the elements of sustainability that we will be looking at and going into a little more detail will be environmental support, funding stability, partnerships, organizational capacity, program evaluation, program adaptation, and communication. So environmental support plainly put, is your decision makers to win over. Your policy makers, your tribal council members, your school board members, just your community champions. Which stakeholders do you need to inform or influence about your program that is going to help you sustain it over time? Identify potential decision makers and identify partners to work with. Funding support. Planning for funding, stable funding, should address the long-term needs of your program. Funding highs and lows can put a lot of stress on a program, and it can make it really difficult to provide consistent quality services. So when looking at funding support, you should touch base on constructing funding to easily adapt to trends. New funding opportunities, always keeping an eye out for those, and so that your program can overcome any unanticipated shortfalls. And then again, explore different funding options. Federal, state, tribal grants, local, community grants, different foundations, business owners, just across the board, all different funding options that you should always be keeping your eyes and ears open for. And then partnerships, which is a big one. Partners play a really important role in sustainability. They can connect you to greater resources or expertise. They can provide services that your program may not be able to provide. And they can advocate on behalf of your cause. And partners can range from business leaders to media representatives, organizations addressing similar issues as you, as well as just community members. When your program is threatened, either politically or financially, your partners can be some of your greatest champions when your sustainability of your program is being threatened. So when thinking of partnerships, which organizations will require more energy and time to keep involved? If you have a partner that is really going to help you, but they require a lot of time and energy, are you going to be able to give that to them and not let your other partners kind of fall to the wayside? So being able to give all of your partners the attention that they need. Identify organizations impacted by the issues that your program addresses. And then once you've started a partnership, being able to maintain and cultivate it, and keep in mind how you update your partners and making sure that you're keeping them involved in what you're doing. So my next slide is a little chart that can be useful in trying to make new partnerships and thinking of new partnerships. And this is a great activity to do like at a coalition meeting or with your tribal TAC members to help them come up with new partners. So thinking of 3 new partners or groups that you can engage for your sustainable change efforts, and how will you interact and motivate them? So your first question is, who is a new group that could you partner with, and why should they care? Why should they want to partner with you? Make sure that you have definite answers for that. What are their priorities? What's their mission, their vision? What activities are they doing? And how do they mesh with your vision and what you're doing? What resources or assets do they bring to the table? Who's their target audience? Do they have volunteers, their money, influence? What can they do to help you out? And then how can you help them? Why do they want to partner with you? What can you bring to the table for them and help them out in return? Who's your connector? Who can link you to the group? Do you have someone in your coalition that maybe used to be in this coalition and they know some people and they can get you in, a family member, someone that can easily connect you and get the in with that new group? And then what activities could they do to support your policy effort or your entire PSE effort? And then make sure to assign someone or 2 or 3 people to make that connection and make sure that the partnership is formed. Program evaluation. Evaluation can really help keep your program on track with its goals and its outcomes. With the data that you get from your evaluation, it can show that an activity or a strategy that you're using maybe isn't working, and you can correct your program's course to become more effective, or more importantly, the data you collect demonstrates your program's successes and the impact it has, and how it's a powerful tool for gaining support and funding. If your data shows that your program is making an important impact, you can make a strong case for your program and why it needs to continue. So some things to touch on is to ensure that your program staff are available to collect and report evaluation data. Usually it's kind of, everyone knows that needs to happen, but it's not always the most fun thing to do. So making sure that you have someone available or a team available to collect data and be able to evaluate on it. And then regularly collect data on your target population to advocate for the need for and/or effectiveness of your program. And the Great Plains Tribal, I guess it was the GP Pitch program, developed our PSE tool, which is a culturally tailored version of the CDC's change tool. And that is a really good tool to assist with assessment and evaluation, and we do have that available. So if that's something that you would like to take a look at, you can definitely contact us here at Great Plains, and we can send you that PSE tool. Program adaption. I'm sure we're all aware that circumstances will almost always change, and sometimes your program needs to change with those circumstances. And the goal isn't always to necessarily to sustain all of your program's components over time, but rather just to sustain the most effective components and their benefits to your target group. And this can require flexibility and adaptation to your program to change conditions and quality improvement within your program. And again, that's why it's so important to have program evaluation, so that you can use that evaluation and data to ensure that your program effectively uses resources and continues to have an impact. So reviewing evaluation results to assess which components of the program are not working and should be adapted or even just discontinued. If something's really not working, it's okay to discontinue that part of your program. And then to communicate frequently with your target population to find out how well the program fits their needs or how it can be improved. You may be collecting data that shows something completely different from what your target population, in reality, how it works for them. And then communication of your program. People need to know what your program does and why it's important. And communicating externally about your program's effectiveness helps your program gain visibility and builds support from stakeholders. So the more that people know about your program and care about your program and your mission, the more likely they are to support your efforts to continue providing services in the long run. So developing a communication plan that effectively portrays the goals, successes, and necessity of your program. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. I just noted a few, such as photo voice, digital storytelling, and success stories. And we do have a community health webinar coming up in the future months that will be discussing success stories and how to write a good success story. So be on the lookout for that one. And then celebrate program successes with stakeholders at all levels, and especially those that deliver your program. And that can be as simple as, sending out a thank you email or a thank you card, or hosting a lunch for all of your partners as a thank you for helping us implement our program. GPTCHB also has a media toolkit available that has different ways on how to communicate your program and it has success stories in there and digital storytelling and PSA templates. So again, if that's something that you think your program would benefit from, please contact us and we can send you that media toolkit. So these next couple slides are an example of a program sustainability assessment tool. Creating and sustaining a healthier community isn't a short-term endeavor. It's an ongoing and intentional process. So sustainability planning is important because it allows coalitions and communities to address critical public health issues beyond any one source of funding, and helps protect investments made by the community, and it enables collaborative efforts to thrive in the face of change. So a program sustainability assessment tool can enable you to assess your program's current capacity for sustainability across a range of different factors, much of like the ones we just went over. And then the responses you gather from that will identify your sustainability strengths and your challenges across those different factors that affect your sustainability. And you can use the results of that to guide your action planning for your program. So like it has different questions about environmental support, funding support, your partnerships, and you fill those out 1 to 7. How strongly do you agree with that statement? And then at the end, you'll have a final score for each section, and the areas with lower ratings indicate that there's some room for improvement. In which case, you can address domains that are most modifiable and quicker to change. Maybe you have more data available to support that needed change, and you can focus on that one first and getting that change implemented. And then you can develop strategies to tackle the domains that may be a little bit more difficult to modify, and make plans to assess your program's sustainability on an ongoing basis, to monitor program changes as you go forward with making an impact. So as far as PSE changes go, I wanted to go over this little chart that kind of explains the difference between a policy change, system change, environmental change, and our examples of one program that collectively made all of the changes as a whole. So instead of just doing a policy change, their policy change rolled into a system change, which then rolled into an environmental change, and they were able to achieve the whole thing. So a policy definition is a written statement of organizational position, decision, or course of action. And this includes an ordinance, a resolution, a mandate, laws, rules, or guidelines. And the example we used was the Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe Smoke-Free Air Act. And they developed an ordinance which was passed in April of 2015, which then their Smoke-Free Air Act became law in May of 2015. So that was their initial policy change. And then a systems change is changing processes of an organization, institution, or a system, which includes implementing, enforcing, and promoting this change through any entity, through a school, a community, a park, whatever entity you're working with. The Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe Smoke-Free Air Act, they implemented, promoted, and enforced the Smoke-Free Air Act, and they continue to do so through the tribe and their Chun-Li coalition. And then their environmental change, which is a change in the economic, physical, or social environment to make healthier choices easy and encouraged. And this includes, again, any entity that you're working with, schools, stores, work sites, the entire community, healthcare offices. And the Smoke-Free Air Act's environmental change was providing no smoking signs. They also did billboards, and they did communication efforts, such as radio announcements and things like that. So they were able to combine all of their strategies and make it into a whole PSE change. And just to point out again what exactly a policy means, sometimes that word can sound kind of strict, but it's really just a written statement of organizational position, decision, or course of action. So again, an ordinance, zoning language, resolutions, laws, or rules and guidelines. The next topic I wanted to touch on was PSE focus versus event focus, or long-term versus short-term. So and able to really make a PSE change beneficial, you have an event focus, or you have a one-time event, which is crucial for moving on to a PSE change. But to make sure that we don't get stuck on just the one-time event, or the one health fair, or whatever it is that we're doing, a one-time event, and making sure that it's rolling into a PSE change. So a few different examples is like a school setting. They're a common approach, event-focused approach to lowering sugar-sweetened beverage consumption. So they host a teaching event, a unit on healthy beverage consumption, which is great to initially get the ball rolling and to let everyone know and educate everyone on sugar-sweetened beverages. And then roll that into a PSE approach by providing healthy beverages at lunch and in vending machines, limiting the amount of sugar-sweetened beverages on school campus, and to increase the access to water filling stations. Another setting is in a work setting, again with sugar-sweetened beverages, host an education event, educate on impacts of social or sugar-sweetened beverages to our health, and then roll that into a PSE change by developing a policy to reduce sugar-sweetened beverage consumption, provide healthy beverage options at meetings and conferences, and no reimbursement for purchase of sugar-sweetened beverages for your staff. This next slide is touching base on the same thing, just looking at a short-term event leading into a long-term event. Again, a health fair promoting smoking and secondhand smoke education is a great event to have to initially get everyone educated on the PSE change that you're trying to make, which eventually might lead into a no smoking policy for your tribal building, a casino, your powwow grounds, etc. Providing seeds, healthy food education at a community event, which can lead into creating a policy for a community garden. Again, just turning that short-term, one-time event into a sustainable PSE change. So to wrap it up, a few local examples that I threw in here that were really able to wrap their whole PSE change into a whole component and be able to make the sustainable PSE change. Flandreau Santee Sioux Tribe, they worked on a PSE change to promote physical activity in their environment. Their policy change was to promote physical activity by extending their gym hours for open gym and midnight madness. So they didn't necessarily write down a policy for this, but they wrote it into their gym laws or their guidelines that they would extend their hours for evenings and midnight madness hours. And then their system change was having their staff available to implement the extended hours, making sure that there was someone there to actually extend the hours. And they also threw in some worksite wellness challenges into their system change. And then ending in their environmental change, they created physical activity signage in Dakota language. They created different posters of different activities and how to say that activity in the Dakota language. Again, with the Flandreau Santee Sioux tribe, they had another PSE change focusing on no smoking. So their policy was a written policy to prohibit smoking in all buildings, to provide safe and healthy work environment. Their system change from that was the implementation and the enforcement of the policy. And then their environmental change was no smoking signage and promotion of not smoking commercial tobacco. Another good example is from the Sisseton Wahpeton Oyate. They developed a pregnancy health survey for parents of newborns on the Lake Traverse Reservation, which they completed in 2017. And through this survey, they were able to collect data and important information about mothers to newborns and breastfeeding statistics. And they were able to take that information and turn it into a PSE change, with their policy change being their tribal executive committee designated 2 rooms for nursing mothers by an executive memo. Their system change then being a safe space for breastfeeding mothers in the work site, and their environmental change being physically the 2 designated rooms, and the support of the tribal health. And they also created some signage that showed the statistics that they got from that survey, and they made a bunch of different posters just supporting breastfeeding and breastfeeding in the workplace. So that was their environmental change. I think that's my last example. So this is my contact information. If any of those resources I mentioned earlier, you would like any of those, please contact me and I can either get them to you or put you in touch with someone who can get them to you. I guess if there's questions, I will turn it back to Whitney for those.
Sarah Lincoln from Siston also mentioned that they did water filling stations and are creating signage for their new walking path as some of their PSE strategies as well. Thank you for sharing, Sarah. Does anyone have any questions for Shannon or myself on PSE strategies, sustainability, implementation, any of those things? Okay, well, I just have a couple things I'm going to go over. So if you think of anything, please put it in the chat box or unmute yourself and ask me. Also, at the beginning, I said that I was going to put my email address in the chat box so that whoever called in could send me their name. But that doesn't make sense because they can't see the chat box because they called in. So I'm just going to say my email address. I'll also put it in the chat box. It's Whitney, WHITNEY Nordvold, NORDVOLD @gptchp.org. And if you received the email for this, I'm the person who sent it out. So if you received an email forwarded to you from somebody else, you didn't get it from me, you should be able to find it on that email. And I'm just going to type it in here. And then I need to put the evaluation link in there too really quick. Give me just 1 second, guys. I'm sorry, I usually have this prepared, but for whatever reason I didn't today. I'm sorry, guys. And it just has to be when my supervisor's sitting right behind me too, in my office. No pressure or anything. Where is it? There we go, I found it. Don't panic, anyone. Okay, so the evaluation link is there, and then in the email that I send out, the evaluation link will also be there with a link to the recording for today's webinar. And then Dolores, that was a great suggestion. I'll also add the slides from Shannon's webinar in there too, so that you have access to those documents so you can review those later. Just one last thing, I want to let you guys know that our next community health webinar is on May 9th. And the topic for that webinar is helpful tips on enforcing policy. And that will be presented by Chun-Li Coalition's Ray O'Leary. And they're up at the Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe in Eagle Butte, South Dakota. And they do lots of really great work in their community on tobacco prevention and tobacco cessation, and have implemented and supported implementation of some really wonderful healthy policies for their community. So they will have some great experience and information to share with us. So if there are no other questions, I am just going to close it up here, and thank you all for joining us today. We had a good turnout, and I look forward to hearing from you guys in your evaluation. Have a wonderful day.